Good morning. It is March 20th, 9:47. It's a Friday morning. TGIF. So hope everyone's doing good. Hope everyone has some fun plans this weekend. For me, I'm gonna be well. Actually, today is my dad's birthday, so we're gonna be doing a big, a dinner thing at my folks. We've been doing little celebrations with my dad all week. We went for big Chinese we went to a big Chinese buffet on Sunday, which was fun. And then we got together on St. Patty's Day, had corned beef, cabbage, and the whole thing. And then tonight we're going to do like a pizza night, I think, and of course a movie. So I'll probably do a review for that movie. I picked up another movie at Opera House Video, world famous Opera House Video. It was hard making a decision on what movie to get because my folks, there were a couple of movies I want to see, but they don't have a Blu-ray player. And the two movies I was going to get that I kind of want to get, and I might rent them this weekend. The two movies I wanted to get were Blu-ray, so and plus I don't know, like sometimes I don't know, my folks always surprise me though. I mean, my mom is way into horror. My dad used to when he was younger could not stand watching horror films. But then he really kind of got into horror to a degree where we were able to, my mom and I always loved slasher movies growing up. I always, she got me into slasher movies. We used to watch them all the time. Vivid memories of watching, the Friday 13th movies with her, also the Evil Dead films. So those were movies of our, of my youth. And my dad always hated those movies. But now, like the last 15 years or 10 years, last 10 years, I'll still rent horror movies at Opera House Video and bring them over on occasion. And he'll actually watch them and kind of enjoys them a lot more. He it used to be, I remember whenever years ago, basically, whenever I would rent movies or get a bunch of movies to watch, I try to get something kind of to their taste because they like dramas. They actually like a lot of foreign films, which always surprises me with subtitles. They are usually open to that. They're big time action movie fans, so that's been a big thing. They're not at all into superhero movies at all. I've never brought any of those movies over. There were a couple times where I did, and they're totally not into comic book movies of any shape or form. But action movies, new action movies, they're into foreign movies. I'm really surprised. We've watched a shit ton of foreign films over the years. Horror films, of course, that's grown, especially with my dad. So comedies to a degree too, but they're pretty open to different things. They like some television shows. But I remember there was a time years ago when I would bring horror movies over, or we would watch a horror movie, like at home when I was living with them when I was a kid, especially. And my dad would be like, "Well, can you guys watch it when I'm not home or when I'm not around or I'm doing something else?" So that would be a thing of where it would be the two of us that would watch the horror movie, and then we'd watch like a drama or an action movie or a spy movie or whatever, all of us. But now we'll watch, pretty much whatever. But sometimes I think my mom is into B movies, exploitation movies to a degree. My dad is not really, but two of the movies I wanted to get that I do want to rent are definitely kind of low budget exploitation movies, but they're only available on Blu-ray, and they don't have a Blu-ray player, so they only have a DVD player, so that's a thing. But anyway, I rented a movie, so we'll see. I it was a it's an Emma Thompson, I think is her name, the actress, famous actress. I had started watching it last year when I rented it. It's kind of a thriller. I thought it was okay. I didn't. I ended up not really finishing it, but I think it's a movie that they would like a lot. So I'm willing to give it another chance too, as well. I didn't see the entire movie, so we'll see. So I brought that over because it was pretty slim pickings as far as picking out a movie to bring over. And I hate that's a thing. Like I always go over with a movie or two, so I had to pick something that was decent, I guess. So again, I've been full on, full on into doing videos on all things Friday 13th, and it's been super fun. The new series that I kind of started for the Friday 13th franchise is I've been doing these videos of where I've been going, taking kind of a deep dive and trying to make these separate videos on all of the different actors slash stuntmen who have played Jason Voorhees over the years. And that's been a lot of fun. I've been learning a lot more about the different actors who have played Jason. So I just did a show and I just uploaded it on the actors who played Jason Voorhees in Part 5, A New Beginning, which is a really awesome movie. I didn't realize in discovering, doing some research about the movie, taking a little bit of a deeper dive, but I didn't realize that there were three actors who played Jason in that movie. And I don't think that's ever been the case before. So, pretty wild, pretty interesting. And all of these actors and stuntmen have all had these really kind of interesting careers even beforehand, before they got the role as Jason. And then obviously with the success of all of these movies and that particular movie that they were in, starring as Jason, the iconic horror legend, that really, of course, catapulted their careers, individually. So it's been interesting learning about some of these things I obviously knew about or know about, but taking a little bit of a deeper dive, I'm like, okay. So I started this new series on doing that, which is a pretty different angle, and I think it's new because I had this little bit of a joke going on where I was like, I should just change this channel, the name of Film Fanatic, to Friday 13th Lovers or something, because I've been doing a shit ton of Friday 13th videos, trying to do different angles, doing the videos from different perspectives, different angles. Obviously from having the chance to see a couple of these movies recently in the theater, which has been absolutely incredible. So yeah, so it's been fun, and this is a different series. I haven't done these kinds of in-depth videos as far as in regards to the actual actors who have graced the big screen as Jason Voorhees. Today's show is going to be on Jason Lives, Friday 13th Part 5, which came out in 1986. Pretty much a new movie in the 80s, starting with Friday 13th, the original in 1980. Pretty much, with the exception of 1 year or two, every year a new movie came out. It's pretty cool how they just followed this certain kind of timeline, this framework, and each movie just kept coming out. Crazy. I just recently watched a really cool show about slasher films. Pizzoel, who has a really great YouTube channel, All Things Horror, he mostly talks about old school horror movies. He's really into 80s and 70s slasher films. Like, that's kind of his jam, which is my favorite. And he is a total lunatic when it comes to all things Friday 13th. I mean, he has all kinds of collectibles and toys. As much as I love films, and in this case, horror films, I have a few collectible dolls. I have some pretty nice posters. I had gone to a horror convention. It was actually my first time ever going to a horror convention. And the convention itself, well, it kind of sucked, but it was lame. I don't know. It wasn't what I thought it would be. And I haven't been to many conventions, which it would be cool. And I think it's maybe kind of surprising because as much as I'm into films in horror films, and I know they have all kinds of festivals and conventions and stuff all the time, and it's a big thing. And some of the bigger ones actually come to Maine. Bangor has a few of them. Portland has a big one, and I watch videos from time to time about different these various YouTube folks that will go to these big horror conventions, and they look amazing. But this one was, I don't know, it was kind of lame. There wasn't a whole lot of people there. It was on a Sunday. They had no movies for sale, which I was really excited about looking into buying some movies, but they didn't have anything. They only sold VHS tapes, which was lame. The one thing that they did have that was really cool, they had this one giant booth there with all vintage posters, like real deal posters. Sometimes I like newer, there's a big thing where a lot of artists are doing these kind of newer, renderings of movie posters and things like that. With a lot of the boutique labels that have been putting out a lot of older films, there's usually a lot of films come with like the slipcase where there's new artwork kind of on the forefront of the package, and then you open up the actual DVD or Blu-ray or 4K, and then they have the original artwork. So that's a big thing. Sometimes I think it looks not very good. I like the old school look, but I was able to buy some really cool vintage posters at that convention. That was the only thing that was really cool about it, really. I mean, I don't know. It was okay. I got like an original vintage poster for Friday 13th, which I have hanging, which is a really amazing poster. Pretty much the best poster around. I got a really great Lucio Fulci poster for Zombie. Also, a really awesome print of the original artwork poster for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Also, got a really good George Romero's Night of the Living Dead poster. So I've gotten some good ones, but that was really it. Anyway, I'm not really into the whole convention thing. I need to go to a good one and have that, exposure. But anyway, I have been digging into Friday 13th big time. And what I was starting to say with Pizzawell, who's a really great YouTube guy, he did a show recently. Well, actually, it was from 3 years ago, but I watched it the other night of his, I think it was his top 15 or top 20 slasher movies of all time. And number two on his list was Friday the 13th, the original. So that was really, really cool. Not a huge surprise, I guess. His number one was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I was like, okay, yep, good stuff. I was surprised by some of the movies he did not talk about. So, but anyway, that's the beauty of life. Everybody has different opinions and different viewpoints and what have you. So today's show is going to be on it's actually the only Friday 13th movie I got to see in the theater, and of course that is, like I said, Friday 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, and it came out in 1986. And this is the only movie in the franchise that I saw as a kid in the theater. I was about 9 or 10, I think I was 10 years old when I saw this in the theater. I remember my mom took me to the theater. It was just, I don't think my dad was there. My mom had taken me to the theater, and it was the only time I got to see one of these movies when it came out. It was, again, this is one of those movies, Jason Lives, that has always, growing up, I always thought it was decent. I never loved this movie. I don't know why. I was so enamored with the first three movies. Or I should say, the first four movies. The first Friday, Part 2, and then Part 3, 3D, and then the final chapter. Those movies were constant. Something I always was watching all the time. Constantly, going in between each of those movies and watching them. on cable at the time as a kid, they would show a lot of these great movies and renting them all the time on DVD, or I should say VHS at that time. And then eventually with some DVD when DVDs came out. But as a kid, it was definitely VHS, without a doubt. All the time, all the time. And I don't know, I was so into those movies. Anything after that, like, I liked them, or I should say I loved them, but I was, I don't know. Jason Lives was one of those movies. I always thought that the tone of it was, which is true, the tone is very different. I thought it was in comparison to, and again, this is like from a 9 year old's or 10 year old's perspective. I always thought it was a little bit silly, a little bit too silly, and I didn't really get some of the humor in the movie at the time because I was so young. And it definitely has a different feel. Part 6 has a different feel. It's way more of a gothic kind of a horror film, especially watching it now. But over the years, and again, I've still, every one of these movies I've seen a million times. But over the years, Jason Lives has been one of those movies that has grown on me so much, and I actually love Jason Lives to death now, and it's actually one of my favorite movies in the franchise. And all of the things that I kind of had reservations about when I was a kid about kind of that this movie has a way more of a gothic kind of vibe. I totally love about it because it definitely has a way more gothic vibe. I've seen lots of interviews with the filmmaker, the director, where they really tried to do a different spin, where they tried to have inject this kind of universal monster vibe, especially or in particularly around Frankenstein. And it definitely has that vibe. And it makes the movie, the film has, Jason Lives has a very different feel compared to the other films, especially the ones before. And now I think that's a total strength because now I absolutely love that movie. It's one of my favorites. And C.J. Graham played Jason Voorhees in this film primarily. Also, Dan Bradley played Jason in the uncredited. He wasn't given credit, Bradley. There's this famous scene in the movie where there's like a group of these people in the woods by or within the area of where Camp Crystal Lake is, and they're involved with like the paintball fighting squad kind of thing where they're going around in the woods shooting each other with paintballs, and it's a competition. And there's a whole scene of where Jason Voorhees basically slaughters all of them, and the kills are just brutal and just amazing. But it's really super funny, super goofy. It is kind of like a black comedy. Jason Lives has a lot of humor in it. Maybe almost, well, they all do. They all have a real goofy thing about them, and they all do have a lot of comedy. But the comedy, I would say, I'd say it's safe to say, is the comedy aspect, or like the black comedy aspect, is definitely dialed in a little bit more, or dialed up a little bit more in Jason Lives. And there's this whole sequence with this paintball group that is competing against each other, and Jason Voorhees is in the woods and kills all of them, slaughters all of them, and it's really comical and goofy. And in that scene, and it's a fairly big sequence. In that whole sequence, Dan Bradley plays Jason, but only in that sequence, which is really interesting. I didn't know that until just now. But C.J. Graham, other than that, plays Jason Voorhees for the entire film. Very, very cool. In that documentary that I've mentioned a lot, which was really the catalyst or gave me the idea to do a show or a series on each actor who's played Jason, there's a really great interview on this documentary. Well, the documentary, again, like I said, sucks, but there's a lot of special features on this disc. It's a DVD, I got it many years ago at Harbor Auto Video in Camden, Maine, which is long dead, long gone. There's really serious. There's all these interviews with all of the different actors who have played Jason, and it's great. It's so awesome. I really enjoy the shit out of it. I watch it all the time whenever I go through my real intense Friday 13th phase of where I watch all of them. I always include that. But it's a really great interview with C.J. Graham, who is still around, has a pretty amazing filmography, different films he's been in over the years. And of course, like many other actors who have played Jason, very similar background. C.J. Graham was a stuntman. One of the part of, I guess you could say, the criteria for the hiring of Jason Voorhees for the Friday 13th movies is they always they always looked out and they wanted to get an actor who could play his own stunts as Jason, because obviously Jason Voorhees is a very physical horror icon. You know, lots of action, smashing doors, smashing windows, you know, a lot of chasing sequences, brutal kills. But they, you know, the filmmakers, all the different directors, every different film, whenever they were hiring, that was kind of a requirement, was that if they hired a particular actor to play Jason Voorhees, they more or less had to do their own stunt work. They would kind of, you know, bend the rules a little bit around that, you know, as you know, with, you know, especially part two, but they would that would more or less be a requirement, because pretty much every actor who has played Jason has a pretty extensive background in the world of being a stuntman. And C.J. Graham has pretty impressive list of films that he was in, movies that he was, well, primarily. I mean, he's an actor. He has acted in quite a few films, but I would say the majority of work that he has done throughout the years before Friday and then after was mostly as a stuntman. He did a film in 2021, which just a few years ago, called Fanboy. Highway to Hell in '91. Teddy Told Me To. Dead Estate, which some of these movies I've never even heard of. It's hilarious. The Haunting of Dark, The Haunting of Dark Nell, Devil's Night, which I've never heard about. Some of these movies are pretty low budget. C.J. Graham was a former nightclub owner. Graham was spotted as a potential Jason Voorhees for Friday the 13th Jason Lives when playing Jason in a nightclub act, which is pretty wild. Huh. And that was, I guess there was a scout there for Friday the 13th and they saw him. Impressing, leaving quite the impression, those casting who, for the people that were happened to see his performance, who were casting for the film, uh, you know, that led to him being asked to play Jason. And then actor Dan Bradley was considered not imposing or threatening enough. So C.J. Graham landed the role. He went on to play Jason in all the movie scenes and stunts besides the paintball scene, like I said, which had already been filmed with Bradley. in the opening graveyard scene, which was played by Christopher Swift. Huh? So that's crazy. So Christopher Swift played. There's a whole like opening sequence with Corey Haim that's really awesome, where they bring. It's kind of like a dream sequence, where they kind of more or less bring Jason back. Interesting. Um, interesting. So then the filmmakers, after these changes, they blended all of the footage together. Really, really interesting. See, that's the thing. You learn all of these new things about these movies. And Dan Bradley, also, again, like he only played Jason in that one sequence, the famous or the infamous paintball scene. Dan Bradley's background, he was a stunt coordinator and second unit film director. He worked as a stuntman on Independence Day, Spider Man 2, Spider Man 3, The Bourne Supremacy, The Bourne Ultimatum, Superman Returns, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where the Wild Things Are, Quantum of Solace, and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Crazy. He has an even more impressive resume than C.J. Bradley. It's wild. Wild. I see, C.J. Bradley is pretty active in the convention circuit. I've seen so many interviews with him over the years. Again, there were technically two other actors who played Jason, but really, really briefly. But he played Jason for the most part. Pretty much every scene, 90% of what you see is him on the screen. So I've seen C.J. Graham over the years be, go, where he's a guest at all of these conventions when it's all centered on Friday 13th. So pretty cool, pretty cool. And again, Part 6 really grew on me over the years. It's one of my favorite. It definitely has a very different vibe to the film. Again, like I said, it has a kind of this universal monsters vibe to it, especially when it comes to Frankenstein. And I've seen interviews with Tom McLaughlin, who is the director of Jason Lives, and he has talked about that a lot, where he wanted to kind of change things up. Making Part 6. So the franchise has been going on for a long time. This is the sixth movie in this big franchise. So they're trying to think of, trying to keep this alive. There's a rabid fan base that loves these movies, like myself. But they want to, they want to change things up. They want to, you know, maybe bring the movie to a different and new audience, but then find a balance with keeping the fans that are already into the franchise, keeping them happy and satisfied. Giving you or giving those folks, myself included, where you see those things, those tropes that you expect and kind of want to see and love about a slasher movie. So they did a really cool thing. He was really talking in this one interview. The box set that I have for Friday 13th is really great because each movie in the box set, there's a lot of great special features and interviews with all of the directors and the actors, but especially with the directors of each film. Really interesting, really insightful. And the interview with Tom McLaughlin's really cool because he talks a lot about wanting to really change things up, wanting to give the movie or his movie that he was directing, Jason Lives, and really the entire franchise, give it a little bit more of a kind of a dark comedy feel. But then he really wanted to kind of change the vibe, kind of the aesthetic of the world of the Friday the 13th universe by bringing something fresh. And he talks a lot about in this interview about being really inspired by the classic Universal monsters. You know, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Invisible Man, all, you know, really the first the first monsters of their kind that kind of kicked off the whole kind of horror genre, more or less, with monster movies. You know, and also, you know, the some of the most, if not the most influential movies, you know, for that set the bar high, but then just went on to influence generation after generation, which even today still is influencing new films. He really wanted to take a lot of that classic aesthetic, especially around Frankenstein, played by Boris Karloff, and give the movie, in this case Jason Lives, a little bit more of a gothic kind of feel, like that classic old school filmmaking style. And it really does, you know, it really does have that vibe. The whole kind of everything from the colors that are used in the film, the lighting, the way it's shot, the atmosphere has this real gothic vibe. And you don't really, up until Jason Lives, like I wouldn't say that that is has ever been a part. It's definitely not a part of the other films. Friday 13th's real. I mean, one of their strengths is the atmosphere for me, but like more in a traditional, somewhat more of a traditional sense of like this the classic slasher vibe, where you know takes place in the woods by a lake, in this case Camp Crystal Lake, and it has this kind of dark vibe. It has a real creepy vibe. You don't know who the killer is, and then there's a series of these teenagers that get picked off one by one, and it just has this dark kind of creepy vibe, which has been a part of all of the other movies. And I think the I personally feel that the final chapter probably has the darkest vibe. You know, the use of the rain and all of these things. A lot of the scenes are shot in during this rainstorm, and that's a big thing. That's a part of the franchise, which I really love of all of the films. But with Jason Lives, it was very different. It feels like you're, especially the opening sequences of the film. I totally see and feel that classic kind of Frankenstein Universal monster vibe. It has it it just has that feel of kind of classic horror filmmaking, which you don't really see anymore. And it also has a lot of humor in it, where it gets really goofy and silly. But I think it's good because the franchise needed a little bit of levity. It needed something new. For any franchise to be successful, and in this case, a franchise that is as huge as this one is, there always need there's always, for it to be successful and for it to remain, you know, vital. There always has to be new elements, you know, interjected. And I think with Jason Lives, they did a really great job with that. And the preceding movie, The New Beginning, very different movies. And I've said this before. C.J. Graham too. I think he plays one of the best Jasons. He's one of my favorite Jasons. He has this certain kind of strength to his that he brings to the character, a certain kind of power that we haven't really seen before. And I really love his costume. The makeup effects are great. The practical effects are really awesome in this movie. Really unique. It just has this really cool, unique vibe. But I've said this before in other videos. I feel like, yeah, these are schlocky, slasher, low budget exploitation movies. Like that's what they are, and they're just entertaining as all hell. But I think from an actual, you know, a little bit more of a serious viewpoint, I don't, I don't think these movies get credit for you know, for in regards to taking some risks at the franchise as a whole. I mean, when you think of A New Beginning, where Jason essentially is not even in the movie, and then Jason Lives today, which I'm talking about, and then the following movie where it is really, really different. A New Blood, all three of those movies, and then, Jason Goes to Hell, and then Jason Takes Manhattan. When you look at those movies, they are so different from each other, really. I mean, just so incredibly different. You have one where a movie where Jason is not even in the film, and then the next film, Jason Lives, is essentially this kind of universal gothic kind of tale or take. And then A New Blood is kind of this big introduction to this new character who has these psychic powers and abilities that eventually fights Jason. And then Jason Goes to Hell, which is such a wild concept. And then where Jason takes Manhattan, but essentially stays on a boat most of the time. And then when you think of Jason X, where Jason is in space, those are really those are as different as you could possibly conceive. And I don't think too many other franchises. Friday. I think the Nightmare on Elm Street films definitely took some risks and chances, but Halloween. But I don't think, in comparison, Friday 13th in realistic terms took more chances as far as really trying to take the movies in different areas. But still, they're all without a doubt 100% slasher movies. So, and I don't think the franchise as a whole is given credit for taking some real risks. But anyway, yeah, C.J. Graham's awesome, and in a movie that, again, like I said in the beginning of the show, has grown for me immensely over the years, and it's one of my favorites. So thanks again. We'll see you next time. Peace.